Alright, everybody, welcome to another episode of, the Game Design Joshcast. I'm using a new template that my friend Ken has made and set things up. I'm going to get one specifically for the weekend shows as well, hopefully this coming week. But I figured this will be a nice way of showing things off. We are now, a little bit more, we won't be as stretched out anymore in this one. And hopefully the chat looks a lot better. I think I got things centered right. But I am, of course, Josh Blazer from Game Wisdom, and join me as my co-host for the show. Please welcome Joshua Reyes.
Oh, thank you, Josh. It's great to be here again. Honored. A
Mm-hmm.
pleasure to look into this topic, and let's see what's going on, my friend.
All right. So, for our topic this week, we're kind of continuing what we were talking about last week in terms of how things have changed. We focus more on the indie dev side. For this week, we're going to focus on what consumers want and kind of how much things have changed over the past 10 years. And it has really changed in terms of what somebody's willing to spend money on. And hello, Pony and Amanda in chat.
Welcome. Thank you.
And for anyone watching this live or recorded, if you have any comments about the new template, let me know in the comments as well. If there's anything that looks off or things like that. But when it comes to talking about the consumer side of things, it is a very unique part about the game industry. And I think it's one thing that a lot of indie devs tend to not really take into account. I think that's for good and bad. That indie developers, as I'm sure everyone watching this, they can make whatever they want. It is the beauty about indie dev that you don't need to worry about what the shareholders say. You don't have to worry about Microsoft unless you've been bought by Microsoft lately. Will
We
tell
can
you,
pivot. We
yeah.
can pivot, right? We have the ability because we're so small and we're a small team. We can decide and shift and move very quickly. And if you do a development cycle that's quick, you can
Hmm.
get through it and get it out within time. And then so the trends are not really affected so much. But anyway,
Yeah.
continue, Josh.
Yeah. But of course, the downside about that is that being able to make everything that you want doesn't necessarily mean you're going to make something that's going to be profitable. And hello, Chris and Rat's Tail as well in chat. And
Welcome, welcome.
this, I think, has always been the struggle for any developers. The idea that I'm going to make a game, but is it going to sell? Is it going to even make? Oh, and hello, Leona as well. But uh, is it going to even be able to make enough back? And consumers have certainly shifted in terms of what they wanted. I mean, we can even go as far back as, the 80s and the 90s with how things have changed. Again, back in the 90s, for the young people watching, which seems like, 100 years ago, that we got maybe one game a month, maybe
Yeah.
two. That was,
Two.
the busy month.
It was
To
blowing up. If you had four, four, you would seem some like maybe around Christmas time or something, you'd have four, and that was unbelievable. Usually it was two. You had like
Mhm.
two choices, right? And now
And
you
those
have
choices
way more,
were
way
like
more
eighty
than that.
dollars sometimes. I remember I think I spent like $80 on a Super Nintendo game.
Right, right.
And that will probably shock a lot of the younger people watching this right now. Spend $80 on one AAA game.
I
And
think that might help some things, right? If like the price of games actually are rose into what they should be, which I mean, honestly, like 80 to 125, maybe even 150 is where some AAA games should be sitting.
mhm,
Um, and honestly, like it's not sustainable to keep selling a $60 game over and over again. And that's
mhm,
part of the reasons a lot of the issues with the industry is caused by that. A lot of the decisions are financially made by that. We have this price point, we can only sell it for this much. And that also causes other little things that we don't want in the game, like
mhm.
microtransactions, NFTs, bro. We
Oh
don't want
yes.
any of those things, and those things are put in there due to that fact. I think we'd have much more pure games if we were able to actually
Mhm.
charge what they were needed to be sold, but that's a whole other discussion there.
Oh yes. And it's one that again has really changed so much about what you're actually spending money on in games these days. That Like for instance, in one of the mobile games, I just spent like $5 for like their monthly, bonus passive stuff, and the market has really reacted in very weird ways in terms of what consumers are willing to spend money on. That you will see somebody. I've watched streamers of mobile games, and they've like loaded up
Yeah.
someone else's account, and like I didn't know about this, but apparently there's now a term beyond whale that mobile
I was about to
developers
ask
and
you, is it
consumers.
still whale? It's beyond whale.
Yeah, there's now it's called Leviathan. That's what a lot of mobile streamers will call like these are like the Super Saiyan whales that they will spend like I can't even imagine how much money in these games.
It must be also like if they stream, it also must be like a clout thing. They're like,
Hmm.
look how much I'm spending. I am Leviathan. Please subscribe. There must be something to that also.
Oh yes,
Um,
I mean,
Wild.
and then conversely, you ask somebody to spend $29.99 on a video game, and they're going to look at you like you just came from another planet. How $29 for one game? And
One game? What am I gonna, no way. They can't even fathom that, spending $30. It's the market segments are very strange like
yeah,
that. You'll have one that'll be like, yeah, for sure, I am Leviathan for life. They got the tats on them. And other
hmm
ones are like, will strictly say, I've never spent a dollar on video games. To this day, they will
hmm
not pay for a video game like it's some type of religious thing for them of purity that no, I don't want to pay. But please buy video games.
yep. I knew a few people at my previous jobs. Like they just pirated everything. Like
Yeah,
they would
yeah.
just like I was working at GameStop, and one day they just literally sat there and they downloaded the cracked version of every game they had onto their modded Xbox. And that was the entire day. Like that, I just like watching. Okay, put this game on the Xbox. We'll put this one on,
That's
and
wild, wild, wild.
it's again the consumer's perception of what the value of a game is has changed. And I mean, one of the bigger things that has really, I think, it really hurt a lot of the industry over the last 10 years was the race to the bottom. The idea that this
Yeah.
was kind of when the mobile market really was prominent. This would probably be like, I would say maybe like 2011, 2012 to maybe
2011,
like,
yeah, and we're still recovering from that.
yeah.
Like it's really affected like indie game marketing for sure, because we're not in indie games are not like we're not mobile games. You can be on the mobile, but
Hmm.
mobile has just destroyed the market in all kind of ways when you can just get on your phone and everything is free, and then so you have kids growing up, but right,
Hmm.
like they haven't even touched the console yet. They're playing like my 4-year-old. He hasn't touched a console yet. He might have, but he for sure has played a phone game, and he has
Hmm.
played multiple phone games. And so their first interaction on a phone, and to his knowledge, we don't pay for them, right?
Hmm.
Not yet. And
Hmm.
so, and like most children are raised with that aspect at first, is most games are free. And so then all of a sudden being like, hey, these ones cost money, for them might be some type of moral dilemma for them to deal with. And
Yeah.
then so we're having this huge swath of the market now growing up with, I don't want to spend anything for a game. And so that changes how can we get leviathans out of people that don't want to spend any money. So that's going to drastically change the games that are being created. I think someone I saw today that the announcement for was a Warcraft title, mobile Warcraft title was announced. And so
Yeah.
I'm sure that one's going to be full of all kind of microtransactions and possibly NFT loot drops or all kind of cool stuff that they're going to try to do, right? And that is just caused by that type of mobile market. I think it's super detrimental. It could have been done in a really cool way and gave access, but because of the race to the bottom, yeah, we're still not even close to recover to that. I don't
Yeah.
believe.
And and for those of you watching who don't know exactly what we're talking about, again, when this happened or when the mobile market really exploded in like 2011, 2012, and this was something that I talked about in my next book, that during like the early 2010s, there was this period where mobile was it. That everyone, this is kind of like the second generation of mobile games, that everyone and their brother wanted to make a mobile game. This is when we saw major companies really pitch their IPs. Marvel, Dragon Ball, pick any major cartoon and anime, they would become a mobile game because that's where the money was. And the EFA, I think it's EFA or ESA, the one of the consumer groups who does their annual research into the consumer trends of the video game industry, that by like 2015, it was like maybe 40 to 50% of the people who play video games played it on mobile. When we look at today, more people play video games, especially casual games, on their smartphones than they play console and PC. And when we saw this push, like Josh just said, it was the idea of, wait, I can just download all these games on my phone. I don't need to spend $9.99 or $29.99 or, oh my god, $60 on a AAA game. But of course, you can spend a few $100s on microtransactions, but that wasn't really the point. It was the idea that there was no barrier of entry, and
Right.
it really, I think, knocked the table from under a lot of indie developers. Because again, and this is something I'm talking about with like Games Pass, that
Oh yeah.
why should I give one developer $29.99 or even $15.99 when I give Microsoft $15.99 and I get 80 to 100 games for an entire month?
I think I literally woke up in a cold sweat this morning, and I was like, Game Pass, what is it going to do to the market? Like
Mm-hmm.
that was the first thing I thought. I was like, because we were talking about the race to the bottom, so it was like Game Pass, and then I saw an article a little bit later about Netflix, and that they're jumping into the market now, and it's like, what is that going to do to the market if like now you just pay a sub to a third party, and
Mm-hmm.
that third party contracts those games? So like, what is that even going to do in that regard to like market quality? If we were looking back, like the best games of 2010, the number one game, or we're going to say best game, was Mass Effect 2, right? That's what
Mm-hmm.
people liked in 2010. And then if we go to this last year, it was Call of Duty Vanguard, right? So within 10 years, and then if we go back 10 more years, then it was like Mario and stuff like that. So that evolution,
Mm-hmm.
the 10-year evolution is where do you go from there? Like where's the market going to be in 10 years from there? Is even like there's no prediction.
Yep. I mean, there's no real way of predicting where the market's going to be now in 10
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's you could say you could, and if you tried to predict from right now, I'd say, okay, I should probably make a shooter. Probably a good bet, but that market is the most saturated.
mm-hmm.
There's a quadrillion shooters. I mean, it's not that hard to go out there and make a shooter. Like if you want to make your first game, you could probably go out there and make your first game a shooter. If you kept it within scope and within reason, you could probably make a shooter as your first game. Um,
Mm-hmm. Yep. But the problem, of course, is is somebody going to buy your shooter as your first
mm,
game? And
Probably not.
this is where, or kind of like where our focus for today's topic is going to be on, is what do consumers want? And like we said, like in a small bit of positive news, the race to the bottom mentality, I think, has kind of gone away.
Little bit. I feel like it's ebbing slowly.
Mhm. Yeah, and I was thinking, Pony, to either have our logos or a topic down there. I guess for the chat, for those of you
Oh
watching this
yeah.
recorded, any preference? You want logos or a topic down there? Just so that we have a little bit, some, because I know there's a lot of negative space down there. But again, let me know as well. But with the idea of people wanting to spend more on games today, I think what we've seen, I think, has kind of been like almost like a bounce back from the mobile market. That mobile games are not designed around an end. It is again like the inherent nature of a live service game. You don't want to design a live service game that only has a month's worth of content. You want
I
one.
I think mobiles have maybe leaned a little bit more toward, I think people are understanding they're more of like derivative games or just more like time passers in a way, but I think it's not the perfect medium to actually play like such a lot like, I don't think I'd want to sit down and play an RPG on a phone. Never have, and I probably
Hmm.
never will. So it's not the perfect medium for that. It's for really short things. Maybe you're, telecommuting,
Hmm.
if you're commuting or something like that. And for short little bursts, I think more like kind of what it's created for, Josh, right? It's like kind of leaning
Hmm.
away from at first it was seeming like this is the future of gaming,
Hmm.
and now it's kind of drifted toward a kind of subgenre of a derivative type of games
Yeah, and
that are right.
what Josh said, that was not hyperbole. Like, people were giving, like, TED Talks and GDC talks around, like, 2013 to 2015, saying that
Hmm.
mobile was going to be the future of the industry. Just like how they said PC gaming was going to die 10 years prior. And it did not happen. But
No.
yeah, like mobile development, like with the few of the games that I've played, like I'm still playing Arc Knights. That's kind of the one that I'm focused on right now. Like they've been going strong for 2 years now, and they've already have like their calendar set for the next 6 to 8 months in terms of what content they're going to put out. And of course, that requires you to play these games almost daily. But what we've kind of seen from the console and PC side is that, well, people don't want to be tethered to a single game for that amount of time. They don't want to be told, hey, you can buy this game and it has 600 hours worth of content. If for those of you remember, there was a recent kind of a sticker shock at Dying Light 2 when they announced it was going to have like 800 hours of side quests and cutscenes and towers to climb, I imagine.
Yeah, didn't that just release? Just came out?
Yeah, I think just a day ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm. And people are like, instead of people going like, "Oh my god, that sounds amazing," they're going, "Oh dear God, I don't want to play a game for 800 hours."
Yeah, I don't know. And then look, for someone to say like that's not a selling point, right? That's you saying, "Hey, this game's gonna take a lifetime to play," is not a selling point anymore. Like
Hmm.
maybe a long, long time ago, when there was only one game a year being released, there was only one Skyrim that was released a year. There was maybe
Hmm.
one patch for an MMO a year, right? There's only a couple concurrent MMOs running at a time, and so that you can say, "Okay, there's this much content in a game. Are you ready?" And so
Hmm.
yeah, that's cool to say, but saying that as a main selling point, that doesn't fly anymore. People don't have that amount of time. I think we
Hmm.
were talking about this before, is that you have to respect people's time in the game. Like you have to respect people's time. Time is money. You've heard that saying before. And so
Hmm.
like people only have so much time to play. And like your game would have to be astronomical. We're talking like Final Fantasy 14 level of every aspect in the world for it to like for that to be like, oh, cool, 800 hours. And then if you were playing Final Fantasy 14, 800 hours isn't enough, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yep, and it's interesting. At some point, I think I do need to have another discussion about kind of like the state of MMOs and like kind of how things have really changed over the last like 3 to 4 years on that line.
right. Yeah, that'd be a great one to talk about.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. How the switch is, how old ones are still there and new ones are coming around. But there was a time when we believed MMOs were dying, right? There was
Hmm.
when was that around
2000, I think 8, 2009 was kind of
right
like,
around 2009 around there they were like mmos are dying, and all of a sudden now we have like Final Fantasy 14 as one of the hugest games out there, and it's amazing. It's amazing to me to see that, but it well deserved for that game in all respect.
yeah. I mean, Final Fantasy 14, like that one definitely deserves a lot of credit for not only bouncing back, but it's now considered, I think, the number one MMO. It has officially beat World of
Yeah,
Warcraft.
it's officially like beat it. And like I remember I played that one when it first came out, and it was interesting to say the least. you you could see the pains of the development issues and conflicts. Like
Hmm.
it was so apparent about the internal struggles that the development team was having between, I guess, old guards and new
Hmm.
guards and visions and not budget, because I know they had plenty of money.
Hmm.
Uh, it was mainly like developer issues, and then for them to take that in such a short amount of time, and we're literally like talking what the original part of the game, all they could take from that was basically like
Hmm.
some story, some lore, but everything had to be redone in a short amount of time, and then they pushed it and they redid it
Hmm.
again. It's like one of those like stories that you could talk about. I think it's amazing they pulled that out.
Yeah, my friend Ken, who also did the design of this, I remember he told me he hated the original version of Final Fantasy XIV so much he actually made a dissertation at like when he was at his college about like all the problems with this game. Like it was so
Does
traumatically
he still
bad.
have that? Does he still
I
have
don't
that?
know,
Find out. I'd like to read that.
but yeah, like he just hated that game. I don't know if he's played the newest version, but yeah, like I even said that in the book that most often if an MMO or a live service game doesn't do well, it's not coming back. Like it's just
No,
going to spiral down the drain,
that's it.
and
Yeah.
I think that's like
That's one of the few job, because I think now gamers will kind of like they, because it's kind of expected that a game is going to come out, it's probably going to be buggy. There's going to be a 1.0 patch, and then probably
mhm,
around like maybe 2.4, the game might be solid and maybe you can check into it. So it's kind of expected. But with
mhm,
MMOs, it's like first day, first 1, 2 days, and if people don't see something good in your MMO, that's it. It's the downward spiral, like you said, and there's no coming back. And you can come back and check on it, and they've done all the updates in the world. It's immaculate, a whole other
mhm.
game, but they're bankrupt and the MMO is about to die. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So sad. Hard to do an MMO for sure.
The very same
Firefall.
thing about the early access games.
Mhm.
That you can, if your game is not Dynamite, very first version of early access, people aren't going to be interested. And then they don't see, updates every month, every 2 months. This game is dead. Has a developer left? This game is dying.
Mhm.
And it is a very tough line. And again, it gets kind of back to what this topic is that today, consumers expect more. They're willing to pay more, but at the same time, they want more. And I think that has caused a lot of shock to indie developers, mainly by the fact that if we talk about what indie meant 20 years ago, this was, shovelware games. This was, the $1.99 games you find in a Target kiosk or a
Mhm.
Walmart. I remember I was at a Kmart and they had just like this like bucket full of just like miscellaneous indie games for like 99 cents. And people they play them, but for the most part it was no, I'm going to save my money for a Call of Duty or for Halo or anything along
Mhm.
those lines.
Yeah, and then even if they were like, even if the bin was right before Call of Duty, and if they were gonna buy Call of Duty, they're probably not even gonna look at the bin, right? They're just gonna go straight past it and say, "Hey, cool indie game," or might not even look, and that's it, and walk
Hmm.
out with Call of Duty. And like I was saying, like in 2021, Call of Duty Vanguard was number one. We're talking about gross sales.
Hmm.
Number two, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. Three, Madden, NFL. Four, Pokemon. So there's a little bit of hope because Pokemon Brilliant, Diamond, Shining Pearl. And then again, five. So the top five in Battlefield 2024. So out of the top five, four are shooters, right?
Hmm.
So you'd say right now the market, if I'm going to make a game, would be to make a shooter again. Not to harp on that point, but it's if the consumers speak with their wallet, right? And so their wallet would be telling me I should make a shooter game, right?
Yeah. But the problem, of course, is that if you just try and compete with everybody else,
Mhm.
for one thing, as any developer, you are never going to be able to compete budget wise and just manpower wise with a AAA studio. Like, it's one of the reasons why a lot of indie devs know not to release their game like in September or October, because that's usually when the AAA developers are releasing, the games they're planning for the holiday rush.
Mhm.
And it is a tough line to walk because for a lot of indie developers, maybe just AAA, they're not directly competing with each other. But if you are trying to make a game in the same style, or again, like we saw this with Among Us, the second Among Us blew up, a few dozen indie developers immediately thought, I'm going to make my social deduction game.
Yeah. Hmm.
And how many of those games actually worked? I can't even think of any other ones.
You think of them, I can't even like what's like not even like the second best like good attempt. None of them
Yep.
other than that.
And
Um,
that's the trouble of predicting the video game market. Is that on one hand, we say that consumers, if a consumer likes A, let's make a game like A. But when there's so many games like that, we've seen games that have come out that are just, they're not A, they're Apple. They're just a completely different universe than anything else, and they blow up. You have Disco Elysium, you have Celeste. And when we see these games blow up, then, the cycle, continues. And then we're going to see people trying to copy Disco Elysium and copy Celeste.
mhm.
And it is very hard to kind of gauge what consumers want. We know they want quality, but what kind of experience do they want that quality to be attached to?
Hmm. I think most of the time, what consumers want is they want something they didn't know they want, right? And that's the secret sauce, right? Like most of the time when someone's like really hyped about something and they're just like talking about the game and they're really pumped about it, they're like, I didn't even know I needed this game in my life. And those are the ones that can really stick out. Like I didn't know I needed to play Mario, but I got to play Mario now. You know what I mean? Like I think you gotta find something in that realm, to help that.
Mm-hmm. And it's, again, kind of getting back to the strength of indie development is that you can experiment. Again, like Chris mentioned Stardew Valley at the start here. That Stardew Valley, nobody was calling for a Harvest Moon style game.
Mhm,
The
mhm,
developer wanted to make that, and he
mhm,
spent, like, I think it was like 3 to 5 years working on it.
mhm,
And it turned out that a lot of people really wanted Harvest Moon on the PC. And now we're kind of seeing, and then after that, that again created that period of everyone wanting to make a Harvest Moon style game, or I guess I should say a Stardew Valley like on PC. But it's that fine line you have to walk in terms of I want to make a game that's unique. It's one of the reasons why the Sunday show was called Safely Extreme. That it has to be something that people know and
right,
recognize, but
mhm,
it also has to be something completely different that they didn't know they wanted. And
right. I,
it's.
I I explain it as like I've heard it said before, like if you're trying to like sell and market your indie game, you imagine that who you're selling the indie game to is going to buy a cup of coffee. Like they're walking
Mhm,
and they're walking to Starbucks and they see the Starbucks right across the street and it's like you pulling up in a van before Starbucks with your whatever it'd be like Josh's coffee, rock
mhm,
on, and you're trying to sell them your coffee, right? They're more interested in Call of Duty, right? And
mhm,
so you have to differentiate how you're going to make your coffee. While it may be the same coffee, again, you're making a shooter game, so the ingredients and all the basics are the same. But how am I going to change up my coffee and make it more interesting? Is the cup it's in gonna be cooler? Is it gonna be more comfortable that for them to hold? Are they gonna get 2 refills? Like, you have to figure out how to differentiate yourself and also, like, meet all the consumers' needs at the same time.
yep. And let me scroll up so I don't mess up their name too badly here. To our day's comment about
Yeah, yeah, I was gonna bring that
wishing
up.
that people would try indie games.
Mhm.
it is, again, that very weird thing, because this is another thing about how the market has shifted, the rise of YouTuber and streamer culture.
Mhm.
And this is something that I just wrote about when it comes to this idea of mainstreaming indie games. That
Mhm.
15 years ago, there weren't Markipliers, there weren't PewDiePies and Northern Lions, and hopefully Josh here, or both Joshes who play games and talk about them. So you can have people who will evangelize games on YouTube or on stream. I mentioned the game House last night that we were playing. That I found that game because of a Manly Badass Hero, who covers a lot of indie horror games. There's another one, John Wolfe, that I've watched a few times as well. That there are people who will find these games that you will have never heard of, and they
Yeah,
will put it in front of their market.
our right there, he like our gay gamer who said that, like that dude is a big indie evangelist. Like there's a whole bunch of them on there that
Hmm.
play indie games because again, like if you're like a gamer, right? Like
Hmm.
I think like okay, so if we're talking about consumers, there's two types. There's like okay, Call of Duty sells to a huge aspect, right? But I think there's a huge aspect of that. We say like 50% of the market plays Call of Duty and Madden. The other 50% of them, they're because these guys, the Call of Duty guys, they're probably not going to play your indie game. They're going to be like, oh,
Yeah.
this is garbage. What is this? I'm going to go back and shoot some dudes, right? They're not going to play your game. So let's say we're going to imagine we have 50% of the market to mess with. But if they would understand that an indie game can be safely extreme.
Hmm.
It can be an experience like something you've never seen before, ideas you've never seen before, mechanics you've never seen before, visuals, audio, just all kind of things you've never seen before. And again, because an indie game can pivot, we can do all kind of things that a AAA can't because it's like they're a giant monolith moving
Hmm.
forward. So like if one dude isn't in the back is like, hey, why don't we add this mechanic? They're gonna kick them off and they're going to keep going with what they're already making, what is already sold before.
Yeah.
So like asking Call of Duty to change up your formula, that's not going to happen. But like if there was somebody for an indie game developer, if you tweet at the guy and you're like, "Hey, you ever think about doing this to the game?" They're going to listen. And all indie game studios are usually pretty small and definitely listen to the audience will definitely work with you, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but yes, safely extreme for sure.
And to Pony's comment about like cartoon graphics for kids, you should replace that with pixel art as well. You'll get like the same response.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think this is again one of the things about how what people consider the market for video games have changed. Like, as another point that I forget what year it was, I wrote about this in the book, that um, at one point it was considered like the market was 40% made up of women and 60% made up of male. Today, or as of 2021's report, I think it's now 45% identify as women and 55% identify as male who play video games. And again, when we see more of these games come out, and we see games that cater to different people and different experiences, that it does grow the market. So that somebody who only plays Call of Duty, they're not going to care about Celeste or Gone Home or Disco Elysium. But conversely, somebody who plays those games may not care about Call of Duty, or maybe doesn't really have an interest in Madden or whatever Take Two's microtransaction heavy game is for that year. And that's a really good thing. It means that there is a market for these games. But the question, and this is where things get very complicated, is just how big of a market there is. And that's something that I certainly don't have the answer to. And it's something that we were talking about this tweet somebody put out earlier today about like what their thoughts on about indie success, and it kind of echoes a lot of what I've heard like people like Jake Burgett and Jeff Vogt talk about. That if you want to make a very niche, very unique indie game, you can do that, but you also need to budget around the fact that you may not get 100,000 people interested in that. You may not even get 50,000 people interested in it. And if you,
Yeah, or zero,
yep,
like zero. Uh, so that's the like okay. So the main thing, okay, like keeping your expectations
mm-hmm,
in scope and being like, if I'm gonna make this weird spaghetti simulator,
mm-hmm,
um, that you need to know what you're like. If you're really into it for money, you're gonna have to like research the markets and
mm-hmm,
just really do your research and like really get into business, because now it's a business, like it's a business. But like indie games, again, they're games, right? It's games
mm-hmm,
that and indie game developers are making games that they want everybody
mm-hmm,
else to experience this thing that we're creating, right? We're creating an experience for you to hopefully enjoy, right? Like if you were writing a book, to you want somebody to read the book and enjoy it and take something away from it, right? And
mm-hmm.
hopefully all the game developers doing that. Of course, there's a small segment, they're just trying to make a little bit of money, but they're not going to make that much, and they'll get called out pretty quick.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
and to your point about research, a lot of this again is that you need to understand what people are expecting from this market. Because I've seen developers, and I'm sure for people who cover indie developers as well, you've probably seen the type that they will do no research. They will disappear into the indie dev cave that's behind their house for 5 to 10 years.
I just saw a Reddit post, and the dude was working on his game for 8 years. He said, I've been working on this game
Mm,
for 8 years. It was his literal first post that he's ever done, and it looked like it was a pixel art platformer.
uh,
And at the end, and it was a poorly done trailer. And at the end, like you never saw what the main character was in the game. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I
mhm,
wish along those 8 years he would have asked someone to please look at my trailer, or
mhm,
maybe save a couple bucks and have your trailer made, or I don't know, but you can't sit in for 8 years. After I had that, I woke up with Game Pass. So what is that going to do to the market?
mhm,
After that, my second thought was about game development cycles. So that might be another
mhm,
topic that we can talk about, because
yeah,
we can't have games taking that long to make. And I think that if games are made quicker and we offer more indie bite-sized experiences, which is it's a big thing that indies can offer, right? Is we can offer very unique, very cool, very different, very experiential feelings. Again, like I was saying, spaghetti simulator. I might work on it. We'll see. And but I think there's already one out there, and is that we can make really interesting games that gamers can enjoy and digest and talk about. And that's something that, compared to 800-hour Dying Light, which is like you could play that, okay, you're gonna murk zombies for 800 hours and level up and play trophies, or you could play an interesting RTS from an indie developer, an interesting depression simulator, and then the spaghetti simulator, and or you can do all these various different games that indies provide. So I
mhm,
definitely that.
yeah. And that kind of being able to figure out what your focus is going to be on, like to your example about the 8-year developer, like there are a few developers I've interviewed that I didn't put their casts up because it just didn't seem like people were going to get anything out of it. And I hate to sound that
Yeah,
mean, but
yeah,
it's that case of, if you do not do any research, if you don't understand kind of the practice, or again, I use the term foundational elements of game development, your game is just never going to get off the ground. And again, like, that's not even like design 105. That's like design 100. That's design 2. And this is something that we've said. I know
probably
we talked
three.
about this. Yeah,
Design three.
this is something that we talked about last week, and this is something that I bring up in a lot of my reality of game development presentations. That a good game does not guarantee success anymore. That is having an amazing, bombastically great game, that's just step one. Like, if you only have that, nothing else is really going to matter. But even if you do that and nothing else, your game is still going to fail because it may not have good marketing. You may not have done anything to get people to know about. And even mechanically speaking, that we can even talk about again aesthetics. That people don't want to play the quote unquote ugly game. They
No,
want to
no,
play
no, no.
something that looks fantastic. They want
Right.
like Owlboy, but they don't want to wait 10 years for it.
They no, don't want to wait 10 years for it. And then so if I look like where is it? I had the top okay, so HP, the printer company, they did the top 50 best-selling video games of all time. Can you guess what number one is?
Would it be Minecraft?
Minecraft. You've already, yeah, you know. So it's Minecraft, and then number two is Grand Theft Auto, and then number three is Tetris, and then we have Wii Sports, right? So okay, so we can say, okay, so if we don't even talk about the graphics, but the graphics in Minecraft are all consistent, right? Everything is
Mm-hmm.
consistent, right? Like you already go in knowing that this is what it looks like, and then everything looks good because it's consistent, right? So you can have like just consistency in the art can make it look good, right? If you know what the vision is for it. And not saying that the dude had a vision for it, but it just he kept it the same, right?
Yep,
So
it's that again. Like when we talk about aesthetics, like that is several topics worth of discussion when it comes to the game industry,
mhm.
and it is that line for a lot of people sometimes between a game that I'm going to at least give it the possibility of maybe checking out,
So maybe kind of, yeah.
or I will never look at this game. And like for like myself, I'm on again a lot of press key sites, a lot of places where developers allow you to talk to or put their games up there, and I see all manner of variety of thumbnails, and there are a lot that I don't even bother clicking on the game. Like it is just like again, it's just like spaghetti art. They just like threw something together very
Yeah.
quickly,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this I think is another very important point to mention that consumers want to trust the developer. They want to know that if I give you $5.99, $19.99, $29.99, whatever, I am getting a well-made product. It's
Right.
kind of like
Please make sure my save files work. If you have save, please make sure that it doesn't like just delete itself or something, or it'll run at least. Please make it run, and that maybe controller support will be cool. Yeah, there's the minimum that you
mhm.
have to meet.
Yeah, and to Juan's comment about Monster Hunter World, I remember I read
Oh,
an interview that the developer, they basically, back in 2013, 2014, they basically had their mission statement to make a globally successful take on Monster Hunter, and that required completely redesigning the onboarding and making it so that it was palatable to people who didn't already play the other five, or I think it was like six or seven different versions.
seven. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was like there was a PS Vita or PSP version
Oh,
that I
yes.
played. I mean, and it was hardcore. Like it was a
Mm-hmm.
hardcore game. Like they wanted you to make you feel like you were really like those dudes. They were sitting in the boardroom like, okay, if we hunt a monster, like you need to get your sword and get your swords, everything ready and prepped, and like so you're prepped for the hunt, and it was really neat, but it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I quit after 3 hours. I put in like 8. I really gave it a go because I wanted to try, and I was like, why is everybody playing this? So I tried to play it. But the new version, that onboarding was like it was a whole different world. Like
Yeah.
it actually taught me the game, and I've already played it and tried it, and I actually learned things about the mechanics that I didn't do before. It was a pretty decent onboarding experience. They had you in the fight, kind of
Mm-hmm.
talking about it and stuff. Yeah. Good food making
Yeah.
cutscenes, exactly.
Mm-hmm. That's the
Those are always
secret.
good.
Yeah.
That is a secret.
Uh,
Petting dogs, food making scenes.
I'm pretty sure like the cutscenes for the actual cooking probably are like most bigger than most indie or small indie developer budgets for like those like 10-second cutscenes.
Right, and someone mentioned earlier about that AAAs can do things that
Hmm.
indies can't. Yes, so there's strengths that they have, and they have massive budgets, right? Like if I had a massive budget, I could get a really sweet CGI scene for
Hmm.
my game, right? Because CGI is super expensive and it takes a lot of time. You need
Hmm.
highly talented people, highly talented artists. You need
Voice actors, you name it. Like they can really do well in presentation. One of the things that I
mhm,
say a lot is that AAA is where you go for refinement. You are going for the most polished
mhm,
take on
mhm,
FPS.
mhm.
Indie dev is when you go to for uniqueness. That it's a game that
Exactly.
I've never played before, and
Mhm.
to I think Hours said this earlier that I'm the same way about like focusing more on indies as opposed to AAA games because I've played all the first person shooters, I've played all the platformers, and I've failed at all the racing games. But when I play an indie game like Slay the Spire or Webbed or Library of Ruina, that's something that I've never seen before. And indie developers have gone away with, I think, uniqueness over polish for a lot of the past decade.
Mhm.
But I feel like that may not be enough for today. That
No, it's not. It's almost at the verge of being unsustainable because eventually, like my current game that I'm making,
Mhm.
Samurai Pig, if it's not the first, it's gonna be the last, and there's not gonna be another one. Like, nobody's gonna be like, "Hey, look at that one that did good or didn't do good. Let's copy it." And anyway, I got the IP. So it's
Mhm.
like for there's not gonna be you can't. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. You go ahead there. But
um, that for consumers today, they they not only want a great
yeah,
experience,
yeah, yeah.
they want to make sure that it doesn't break their computer or it has subtitles
Hmm.
and basic accessibility. And there's this, I think, trend for a lot of indie developers that they feel like they could ignore this stuff because they were
Yeah,
small.
they're like, okay, I'm a small indie game, but that stuff turns me off the most. Like
Mhm.
if I'm gonna download if I go to itch and I download your game and you're I can't even exit out of your game, that's not cool. Like I need you to take 5, 10. I need you to go check out a wiki to see how to create an exit for your game.
Uh,
Like that's not I don't need to go to Task Manager to shut down your game. Like that's you know.
my big thing that I basically ding every indie developer on is if they don't volume sliders. And there are some developers who they will probably argue and say, but who cares about volume
Who
sliders?
cares,
Just
man?
lower. But
Lower
no.
your mm-mm. No, because because one, you need to have a volume slider in your game. Like that's just bare minimum. Okay. And like and B, someone might need to for various reasons. If they're streaming your game, they're gonna dock you for it, right? And if they're and three, if they're four, if they're streaming your game, they can't adjust the audio for some reason that's not so you're just like murking all your audiences. Like nobody wants to see that. And it doesn't
Mhm.
take that long to do it. Whatever
Mhm.
you're working in Godot, you're working in Unity, you're working in Unreal. If you can't figure it out, someone already has, and there's a
Mhm.
plugin or there's some code you can find to figure out how to get in your game. So there's no excuse for that,
And
right? None
controller
at all.
bindings as well. And,
Come on, man.
and again, like, this is the stuff that, when we're talking about here and when I make a design video, that this is like this isn't like walking. This is like crawling on the ground in terms of something that should be in your game. It's something as foundational as that.
Hmm.
But for
Like all of those things should be like you have to they're not even going to be a thing. Well, my game is so cool, it's going to get away with it. It's not.
no,
It's not. No, no, it's not. Period. Like you would have to make the most monumental, amazing game, and I promise you, your first game ain't gonna do it, right?
hmm
And not even your second or your third. Like you're gonna have to get with another. You're gonna have to get with other members, or you're gonna have to get expanding your network if you want to sell anyway, right? If you want your game to get noticed. And those other people are going to be like, you need to put that volume slider in, homie. Like we can't.
yeah.
So.
And this is again, I think, one of the big things for what consumers expect. They have they have a basic checklist of what they're looking for in a game. And it's one of the things that we've talked about in terms of, the foundational stuff that makes your game work. This is why, again, going back to your point about research, that's so important. That anytime a new game becomes the hit game, be it The Binding of Isaac, Celeste, Disco Elysium, Doom Eternal, whatever, people will now expect similar elements out of that genre. Whether it is from a mechanical standpoint, even just from a quality of life one, about being able to change, the color of the UI or change the size of the text.
If you're making an FPS, the
Mm-hmm.
controllers have to be default of a normal FPS. If you give me different controls on that FPS, first of all, it should be a controller. I should be able to play it on a controller
Mm-hmm.
and mouse.
Yeah.
And if I'm playing on the gamepad and it's this your made up version of an FPS, I'm turning off your game.
Um.
So you have to have all of like if I'm playing a Dark Souls like game,
Mm-hmm.
roll needs to be on the same button that it is in Neo, right? Like it all has to be
Mm-hmm.
the same because what you're taking me out of. First of all, you didn't consider. First of all, that's telling me you didn't consider
Mm-hmm.
your game at all. Like if first thing I'm running up and you didn't do that, that's telling
Mm-hmm.
me a whole lot of bad. And it's just like the volume slider. If you didn't
Mm-hmm.
consider the volume slider, that's telling me that you didn't consider a whole lot of other things, right?
It meant you
And
didn't do research.
you didn't do any research, right? And it's not to say, it's just okay, try again next time, I suppose. Just keep trying it and put that volume slider in and get those gamepad settings right and work on some other things.
Yeah. And I
Neo, yeah.
played a platformer that I think like the jump button was like L button. Like they use a back and start as buttons you had to press during the gameplay. And
Wow.
again, like
Wow.
this is why, and like going back to controller bindings, that even if you put controller bindings on, you still need to come up with a functional control scheme for your game.
Mhm,
Because just as there are people who will immediately go into the menu and change
mhm,
every single button, there are people who are just going to load up, go, I'm hitting A button, why is my
just
character
not
not jumping?
exactly. So
This
you
game's
kind of have to
broken,
have
refund.
you you kind of have to go with like the natural like like in your genre, so to make it simple because
Mm-hmm.
you've done your market research and so people who play your genre will know that if I press X in this game, it should do the same thing in this game, right? So like, and if you have a unique mechanic where you got to press forward and R1 or something like that, you need to explain it, right? But the basic functionality of moving, rolling, jumping, shooting, firing,
Mm-hmm.
that should already be that stuff is set in stone by now, right? Like we
Yeah.
can't change it back. I think I remember, I don't know when it was when there was between on the PlayStation and maybe the Xbox that
Mm-hmm.
they had the A and the and or the circle and the X backwards. They had cancel and confirm backwards
Mm-hmm.
between the Japanese for a little bit,
Oh,
and then they finally
yes.
standardized that. That drove me nuts in the PS2 era.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the whole like PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3 are like I would say like maybe very late 90s into maybe mid 2000s was when we really began to see this standardization really take effect in the AAA space. And I think indie developers are going to, or if they haven't already done that, it's going to happen now in terms of yes, if you want to make a platformer, nobody is telling you to just go make Mario or go make Celeste. But
Mhm.
you still need to understand how did Mario use their UI? How did Celeste do theirs? Because again, this is basic knowledge. This is not something that takes hundreds of hours of play testing and drawing up specs to figure this out. This is stuff that you should be able to know within a minute of starting a game. And it's again why we've said this many. Oh, that's nice, Chris. You got dumped to go play Minecraft there. But this is why we say that the first 5 to 10 minutes of your game are so critical to understanding or to the success of your title. Because people don't want to find the fun. And I think this is something that, again, has kind of been given extra importance by the rise of mobile games. That mobile games are designed to get you in, get you to figure it out, and then
Instant.
start playing within like 20 minutes. You should not, and I see this from a lot of developers
You meant
that,
20 seconds, right? You
yeah,
meant 20 seconds, not 20 minutes, right?
well, yeah, like the most complicated ones may be like 5 to 10 minutes, but
Yeah, yeah,
again,
yeah.
it is quick. I should
Super
not be
quick.
spending 30 minutes to an hour, and I'm still trying to figure out how your game works.
Right. I think if you'd want to go and study onboarding, well, sometimes they're really like constrained by the UI. When
Mm-hmm.
I made mobile games, the UI was a nightmare to work with because you have so many different phones, and considering what kind of text you're going to put in there made it really hard. And then also the Mac market was too saturated, so I said, "Hey, I'll just move to PC and console. That'll be better."
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, so the onboarding is just amazing. Like I can give the game to my 4-year-old and he knows what to do, like almost instinctively, unless it's like I'm not giving him an RTS or anything, but like even the RTSs, they'll have complicated super systems, but they start really slow and then in a non-boring manner. So it's like you'll start with a small goal and it'll show you, okay, well, you need to move this unit here and this and
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's really, I mean, you're in the game like that, and you know if you like it super fast.
Yeah, and a Pony brought this game we played non guns. This was like last year, but we played another version before that, and like this was a kind of like an action roguelike that
Which
literally
one?
did non guns,
Non-guns.
NONGUNZ, and there was like no explanation about any of it worked. There is nothing about what the controls did. There's nothing about what options did in the game. It didn't even explain how you exited the game. Apparently, when you hit escape, it takes you to a mini game that you then have to do something in that then lets you leave the game.
Oh wow, I think that sounds like the developer was messing with you.
It could have been. And I mean, I've played games that are brutally difficult. I played Fear and Hunger, which is like Dark Souls times a billion in terms of its difficulty and just wanting to kill the player. That one was more intuitive than this one. And the developer, I remember they were arguing with people on Steam about how this is what they want to do. But
Mhm,
again, just because you want to do something doesn't mean that's going to be something that's going to be marketable or something that's going to be
mhm.
even something people, outside of a few dozen or even less than that will want to play.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the days of people wanting to play a bad game and like even stream it, that's gone. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
you want to go find a bad game, you can find a bad game really easy,
Oh,
and
yes.
no one's gonna want to see it. So yeah, that's over. You can't just say I'm gonna make the worst game and up is down and left and right, and you're gonna be so confused. Lol. Nah, that doesn't work. No one wants to do that.
Yeah, and I think that is a very salient point about this conversation that there are, at this point, too many games for people to play. Even if you play indie games. Again, if we're talking about AAA fans, they're going to pick up a Call of Duty or a Madden or a game that they intend to play for the next year, and then they're going to buy the next iteration. But for
Right.
indie games, again, your platformer, your visual novel game, your first third person shooter, it's not unique anymore. If your game is bad, I can find 40 other games that I can try.
Hmm.
And it's unfortunate that I think a lot of developers I think have missed that point about you need quality. You need to I think ultimately it comes down to this simple question. Why should I play your game? And it sounds very simple, but it's a
It's
tough
literally the
one.
hardest question. It's
Hmm.
like the hardest question. It's like, why should I play your game? And then
Hmm.
what do you say? Like, so that's the hardest reason. That's one of the hardest things, but that's the true answer is giving people a reason to play your game, you know?
Hmm. And unfortunately, for a lot of developers, they don't have that answer. And Pony brought up until the end. I blocked that game out, but thank you for reminding me about how difficult that one was in terms of explaining how things work. And yet, Chris's point about stats and attributes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I played a tactical strategy game, and again, like this is how you have to understand about reading the market. We play a tactical strategy game that is supposed to be reminiscent of Final Fantasy Tactics and Tactics Ogre and
Oh
those games.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
one second. But here's the thing: they put it on the PC and it has no gamepad functionality. It can only be played through keyboard, and every single person who played it and commented on the demo, you know, raked their feet over the coals for it.
Recalls, yeah.
And their response, and when I read this, I kind of had that out body moment experience. They said, well, when we played this, we didn't think it was that big of a deal. And I just like sat there going, you played a tactical strategy game reminiscent of console games and didn't think gamepad functionality was going to be important.
Oh
And
wow.
like that again is why as a developer you have to do this research. You need your game, and this sounds very shocking, but your game at 1.0 should be the best possible version of it.
Right.
1.0 doesn't mean let's do 6 more months of playtesting and patches.
No, your 1.0 should be if for some I think your 1.0 should be done. Like I think you should work
Mm-hmm.
for a old school mentality of getting your game out, and if it's not, don't release it if it's not ready to be released. Because
Mm-hmm.
that's asking a lot out of players and not respecting players' time. So if you're saying, "Hey, beta test for me," but you gotta pay me to do it, is it I don't think that's respectful of players' time. So your
Yeah.
1.0 should be definitely ready to rock and ready to go. And
Yeah.
if you haven't play tested enough or whatever, take more time, or maybe move on to another game because it's showing that um it's not ready for the market yet.
Yeah. And like two Jump King and like the slew of Rage games that have been released.
Mhm.
It's another case of I think people. It's a very weird niche. And
Yeah.
people will assume again that because a game, and this is something I mentioned a lot, or a very important point I mentioned in my free to play book, and I think that could be the hiccuping could be on my end. I think my stream is acting all weird according to OBS, but this is being recorded stable, so at least that's good. But something that I said I think is very important is that there's a difference between a fan of a genre and a fan of an IP or brand. And what I mean by that, again, is that if you look at World of Warcraft, at its peak, it had about 12 to 14 million subscribers monthly. That was, peak World of Warcraft like 2007, 2008.
It was blowing out. It was
MMO,
big,
yeah,
huge.
every other MMO developer thought to themselves, if World of Warcraft has 12 million subscribers, that
It's
must mean
bound.
there's 12 million MMO fans.
Hmm.
No, there wasn't. There was 12 million World of Warcraft
Warcraft
fans.
players, yeah. Yeah, Worldcraft players. And like even now after the king has been dethroned in its 14's era,
Mm-hmm.
um the Warcraft, most of them don't even want to Minecraft, a lot of them don't want to migrate over because they were just playing that game. That
Mm-hmm.
was the game they were playing. It's like, and I was kind of thinking about it is like we have some games, like if you look at that list, a few like Tetris is listed on there twice, and it's just like it's literally just a game. Like it's a game like checkers, it's a game like
Mm-hmm.
chess, and like World of Warcraft is almost like that in its way. Like it refined everything during that era. I think during that patch era at the height, it had MMO down, the recipe like down perfect. Like if you wanted to say what's an MMO, I think it had the perfect version of that at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's hard to.
And when you're trying to compete in that space, you are competing against a major IP. And again, like as we said before, one of the advantages of indie development is how agile they are. That if something they're working on just doesn't seem to be working, they can pivot to something else. They can experiment. But when you are building a business, you have to kind of do a lot of the stuff preemptively. You don't want to spend 2 years to maybe find out if an idea is good.
Yeah,
And
that's a lot of wasted effort and time. And so like I brought it up earlier. I didn't get into it too much, but I was talking about I think that indie game developers, once you've got into it and once you understand the once you understand that your game should have a slider menu, your gamepad, just the
mhm,
basics of it, that you maybe as indie developers we should strive for quicker production models, so like a quicker cycle.
mhm,
Get a game, prototype it as fail fast, fail often, get everything up and running, prototyped quickly, and then get that out there to the market. And if people don't like it, get a demo out on itch. And if you're not getting any good reception, we'll move on to something else. And
mhm,
instead of like if you get a medium reception, maybe try and tweak it and put it out again. But if it doesn't get a reception, then that clearly means that what you have there isn't good. So I think that maybe we should try and adopt a quicker thing and avoid those 8-year development cycles and those 5-year development cycles.
mhm,
Those are crushing, and that's very hard and that's torturous to this is a hard a very hard industry to be in. There's so many factors to consider, and so like having an 8-year game dev cycle is terrible. And then the market is changed around you in all kind of ways while you were doing that. And like so while you were making Owlboy,
mhm,
the Owlboy came out again 5 times, and so everybody's already
mhm.
played your game by then. And so yeah.
And they probably played a more polished version of it, because if
Yeah.
they can do in 3 years what took you 8 to 10 years, most
Yeah.
likely they hit a lot better than you did. And this, I think, is another point. As a time check, we are, I think, about like an hour 15 in, so we'll
Really?
probably
It doesn't feel that long.
it always never does and these kinds of things. But we'll probably wrap things up in the next, I would say, 20 minutes or so. But with a lot of developers who are trying to chase after a specific game or a specific genre, that when we see consumers, they, I think, they understand when there's quality. And what I mean by that is something that I've said a lot about some of the games that I've played is that I can sometimes tell when a game is going to be a winner, because it has the like what people say about in Hollywood, like when I played Slay the Spire, Monster Train, again Celeste, or even stuff like Disco Elysium, that when a game kind of like hits all those points in terms of aesthetics, design, marketing, it's very it's easy to assume, I think, as another developer, that they just pulled the slot machine one time, it came up all sevens, they're now super rich and successful and everything is great. But it takes so much to get that game to that point, when someone like PewDiePie will stream it, or it gets picked up by major sites like Kotaku or IGN, and consumers and journalists alike, when they see a game that does well, they understand, I think, subconsciously, that it is a great game. That something like Celeste is a fantastic game that we need more people to play. But they're not going to say that about your game if it's a very it's horrible pixel art, or again the jump button doesn't work, or you literally can't escape, or there's no way to quit out of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like we were saying, you just have fatigue debuff. Well,
Mhm,
I think we'll have another one. Chris mentioned a question about, he's talking about the Dark Souls level of game development.
mhm,
I'd love to have a talk about that.
mhm,
Definitely have a lot of good tips on that. But
mhm,
yeah, like you just have for game dev now, for indie game dev now, you need to have a minimum quality level, right? And everybody can see that. And the end of the story is, if they see you didn't meet the minimum bar of the
mhm,
quality level, that even your wildest game, like even, oh
mhm,
man, there was one where I had to it was that toe game, and it was basically just a room with a foot that came down. I don't know if you remember, it was a terrible itch, it just the worst. It was
mhm,
maybe 10 years ago, where you could make games like that, nothing was explained or whatever, but it was streamed and it did well. But that time's over.
Hmm.
Now it definitely didn't have a volume slider, but now
Yeah.
you have to. You
Hmm.
have to do those basic things. You have to consider all aspects of it. And even if your game is the strangest and wildest thing, look for other strange, wild things uh, in that type of genre and just maybe see what they did. But regardless, you have to have all those basic quality of life things in your game now, period, because those are just parts of video games. It's not part of your game, it's part of a video game,
Yeah.
right?
UX design is such a vitally important, and I think it's easily missable aspect of
Mhm.
good game design. And it's something that I say a lot, that when you do UX right, nobody will say one word about it. You do it wrong, and your entire forum is going to be lit up with people complaining about it. And like, I've played a few games. I played a game from a developer who submitted on Wednesday, and like, I mentioned a very simple point, and they're like, "Oh my god, like, I didn't even consider that." And
Right.
that's not a slam against them, but it's just how these little things about how basic aspects of game dev become standardized, that if you don't understand it, you are going to completely forget about it, and it's going to come back to bite you in some way. Because
Hmm.
I think, as we've said before, people want to be 100% assured that their game is great. And how they do that is by going down the list. They're going to look at the thumbnail. They're going to look at the store page. They're going to look at the videos. Then they're going to actually maybe try the game out. And if your game disappoints them at any single moment during that check, they're gone. And they're
Gone.
not coming back.
Not coming back. They're not coming back. And even if like somehow you could get them back, like if you got, they're
Hmm.
not coming back. No. And like I said, you still got to get all those things right, and you got to consider them. The consumer has to know that you've considered all those things to even consider your game, because if you haven't, they know you're not considering you, right? I
Hmm.
think is the basic thing. If you haven't considered anything about it, if you've missed that, then it's a telltale sign that you're not paying attention to game design as a whole. So,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah. And with like how consumers expect more, I think people don't care about. Yet people only care about
yeah,
when it doesn't
definitely.
work.
Yeah, definitely. Like if you go to an itch and people are trying out your game, that's all you're gonna see in the comments is your save files broken, controllers don't work. Why is there's only keyboard? Why this is a platformer? Why am I using a keyboard? Like that's all you'll see, and you'll see one like cool kind of like it'll be cool with the ellipsis, But if you got bad things, they stand out, and so one of the main things to ensure some type of success for your game is to make sure those things are in check first,
Yeah.
right? For
Uh,
sure.
I played an indie game like 2 weeks ago where the main character has this like annoying like sound bite that I can't even produce with my mouth, in terms of like, it's just like this like noise that just like cuts into your ears when you hear it, and they do that every conversation. And like everyone was here was like, "Josh, for the love of God,
Just
please
turn the
stop,
audio off. Turn the audio
please."
off.
I played one game that I just literally took my headset off and I was just playing because there was no volume slider. There was no way to
Yeah.
turn it off. So I was just like
Yeah.
playing. So the whole stream suffered while I was just like sitting there with my headphones off.
One of the sad things about game development is like, you make game developer friends, and you make friends with them for a while,
Hmm.
and you actually play some of the stuff that they've been building or
Mm.
working on, and that can be like a life-changing moment in your friendship. But yeah,
Oh,
it's
yes. And it's unfortunate because I've seen a lot of developers fall into that trap that they'll only get positive feedback even when it's not warranted.
yeah, you can fall into a
Hmm.
bad echo chamber,
Yep.
right? You can just get a lot of yes people around you, and you're going the wrong way. Yeah, definitely.
I think that will kill my voice if I try to do that sound.
Try it. You try it
Yeah.
once.
And this is, I think, another very important point, that while you should listen to other developers, you really need to get playtesting. You need to
Yeah.
look at what
Yeah.
consumers expect. And if
Game
somebody's
developers game developers are probably the worst playtesters
Mhm,
because we understand like playtesting someone else's game, right? Like or a indie developed game because probably we don't have time to playtest your indie game anyway, and
mhm,
it's probably not at a playtestable state. And then again, we're going to give you a lot of like yeses and stuff like that. So you definitely got to meet the right people, but the main thing is to get your game into gamers' hands, like
yeah,
people that you want to play your game because game developers or game developers we're a little different than gamers in that respect, you know. So
yeah,
you got to get your game into people who actually are going to play your game. And if you can't find out how to get your game QA'd in some type of way, and if that means you got to save up a couple bucks to try and pay people to play your game to test it, at least that'll help. I think the stream uh
yeah. I think it may be doing its own. It's cutting in and out. Why?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure why, and I hope get that fixed at some point. May try mess with some OBS settings. Maybe something is being
Maybe it's
screwed.
streaming too high or too low or something.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not
Okay, I think
sure.
it's back. Yeah, it's back now. Is it
Yeah.
back?
Well, yeah, maybe I need to. If anyone does internet troubleshooting, please get in touch because I could use some help on this one. Yeah, I think it's stable-ish right now, but we'll see. But yeah, I think it's looking good. But
Okay.
and then it starts to crap out as soon as I start talking. But with again, like developers will often latch onto what they really like and kind of ignore the other points. Like they won't complain about your volume sliders or control rebindings, but consumers will. And this again is that issue that I see from a lot of developers who.
And the reason we won't is because we're hoping you're gonna put it in. Like
Mhm,
we're just like it's you know, like and unless you're really a noob, like you should know to have that in there. So if you're giving it to us in a certain point, maybe we're only paying attention to a certain aspect of your game. Maybe we're just testing your player
mhm,
controller or something like that. But we're probably hoping that you'd put that in there, and then you know,
mhm. And it's one of those points about.
and we're back.
I hope so. But it is one of those aspects that I see a lot of developers struggle with that they they'll think that because their game did decent, that there is no room to learn. They did they got like 2,000 reviews or it's earned enough money back, so it was obviously perfect. But there's always room to grow. And again, as we started with the idea of uniqueness versus refinement, that once you have that good idea, you should look into ways of refining that process. Uh, and get, if you can't grow as a developer, you're never really going to be able to succeed in this industry. Unless, again,
Yeah.
you really, really temper your expectations. Like, develop the game around maybe only 100 people buying it, kind of thing.
Right, right. If you wanna be a cave developer, understand
Hmm.
you're gonna get cave developer earnings, right? That's
Hmm.
probably unsustainable. If you want to actually be successful, then you gotta be planning like 3 years in ahead. Like I actually we you gotta be planning. I'm planning for the next games that I'm gonna do already. Like code that I'm
Hmm.
working on is already gonna be followed up for next games. Like you have to plan forward because you're not just making one game and I'm out.
Hmm.
You got to keep making the games, right? That's the plan. We're doing it because we love to make games, so we want to keep making them. And
Hmm.
so I have to learn. You have to learn from every game you made. Chris made a good point about if you're showing your game to someone and everyone gives you different feedback, it's a good sign.
Hmm.
But if everyone gives you about the same problem, then it's probably something you need to investigate. For example, we were
Yep.
talking about the itch thing, that everybody says something bad about it. Then yeah, then that's something you should address. And
Hmm.
so we were also talking about combat controller design when I was working on combat controllers. If I get different things and someone's like, "Yeah, I like how fluid he feels," or "Man, that parry feels really nice," or "Yeah, this attack," and I'm getting to that. But if I get, "Hey, the jump over this doesn't work. And I get that from 4 or 5 people.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I'm trying to jump over this part, it's wrong or it doesn't feel right. Then you need to go get on that.
Yep.
So that's definitely a thing.
And that was
Yep.
something that I spoke with John Brieger about, who does a lot of like play testing. He does like consulting as well. That it's oftentimes like trying to solve a mystery in terms of what your feedback is. You have to parse it, and yet, like you said, like what Chris said, that if people are telling you different things and liking different aspects, that's great. But if 50 people all say I can't play your game, or this section is incredibly frustrating, or these buttons feel wrong, you need to, raise that little mental flag. Because the people who tell you this is not the same as the people who are having that problem. There's probably dozens, if not hundreds more. And the silent majority can easily sink a game or make it succeed, and you may never know what you did right or wrong.
Right. And so like if you don't have some type of QA or some type of feedback going, and you're only expecting from what people of hearing instead of reaching out for feedback, then that's like half of the feedback that you're getting, right? And then unless you have some way in the game to actually track what the players are doing, which I'm pretty sure players, game developers at that level don't have any type of like crash reporting or stuff built into their game. So they're not tracking any of those metrics either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so yeah, that's important. The Joshception.
Hey, Foreign. Yep. And as a bit of a time, I think we'll wrap things for the next few minutes, and just also because of the streaming issues.
Yeah, the
But we're
streaming issues.
also,
Yeah.
uh, I think we've said a lot. I'm trying to think if there's any like major points we haven't discussed. Anything from you?
Um, other than that, other than I found that, you know, I found it a little disappointing that Call of Duty, that is still being the number one sold game, like one and two. So one, two, and three, two shooting games and one sports games. So that's kind of, and I could not find, if you could find them, I'd trying to find like the best selling indie games and I'd want to know. But
Mm-hmm.
I just found that a little strange about what consumers want. If they're paying with their wallet, then that would tell me that we just keep making shooting games. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I think for my final point, that as an indie developer and as the market has grown, it is okay to make a small game if you can make something of high quality. That it's better to have a amazing 5 hour experience as opposed to a 30 hour, it's just padding on top of padding. Because consumers can feel that. They can feel when a game is just going way too long, be it because of the story, be it due to the gameplay. And you want somebody to leave your game happy. You want them to think to themselves, I enjoy my time with this game. Because that's how you build a fan base. That's how you get more people to start looking at your game, to start talking about it. If somebody leaves your game because of frustration or because they just refunded it, they're most likely not going to be interested in whatever you have next, even if you do improve. This is again why, as a developer, you always have to put your best foot forward. That whatever you show to consumers, not to other developers, not to playtesters, but to the market itself, should be the absolute best quality. You really need to curate what people see and what they experience about your game. This is again why you have to be really careful when you formally or publicly post your Steam store page. That when you are opening up for wish listing and for people to see it, you need to make sure that it's the best possible version. Because if you don't, they're not going to tell their friends about it. They're not going to wish list this. And I go for some pancakes too.
Who said cheesecake?
But this is why when we talk about success in the industry and why I think a lot of indie developers kind of miss this point, it is about success leading to more success. That if you do one thing right, it usually means you're doing the next thing right and the next thing. If you do one thing wrong, it often means you're going to do something else wrong and compound these issues. And I guess for my final point, when you do research, this is why it's so important that a reason why a game like Darkest Dungeon or Celeste or Disco Elysium, they didn't succeed because of one thing or because they did one good game. They had to have done a lot of things
A lot of things,
for it
yeah.
to succeed.
Mhm.
And if you don't understand that or you ignore that point, even if you can make a better version of Slay the Spire or a better Resident Evil or whatever, it's still not going to work because you're just trying to make another Resident Evil or you're trying to make another Slay the Spire. You're not doing beyond that. And that's what I think the market wants. They don't want to play the same game they did 5 years ago. They want to see what 5 years worth of development and improvements
Refinement, yeah,
have
yeah,
done to
definitely,
it.
definitely. And I think if I could say one thing, so I'll end my point as the game developer here. If
Mm-hmm.
you are an indie dev out there, for one, I'd recommend that when we were talking about the quality of games, there are several things in your games that have to be there, period, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
like for your game to be considered, you have to have your like when I'm making a prototype, literally every time I make a prototype, the first thing I do is I build my menu. I literally build my menu first. So I make sure my menu and all those things work and you can exit your
Mm-hmm.
game and you can move back and forth. Then I start building my prototype. So I make sure it's accessible and it works. Literally, my key bindings and all that stuff is in the game before I even have a game building. So let me restart. So
Mm-hmm.
if you are making a game, make sure that your quality, that you understand the minimum quality that should be in your game. If you're not sure, go take a look at another game and see the minimum things of quality that are there in those games. So make sure those are in your game. Also, um, make sure try and keep your game development cycle. We're indie, right? We're indie developer games. We're talking to indie developers. I don't think there's any triple A developers in here. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're making a game, try and keep your game cycle small. We don't want to do the 5, 8 year cycle. If you can do that, if you want to do that because you're so afraid to reach out or you don't want to reach out, which you should be reaching out, um, then be expecting those type of like that you should probably have another job and that's just a hobby. Because if you do want to make this a job for you, do you want to do this for a living, you have to consider
Mm-hmm.
all those factors, right? Those are just the bases that you have to have, not considering
Mm-hmm.
everything Josh said that you have to have in place, considering your Steam store, considering your marketing, your community engagement, all those other things have to be there. Bar none. Like that's there. And then get your good game in there. Like your game is just one aspect of the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing for the consumer.
Yep. And again, you need that foundational elements in place. Because if you don't have a good, solid base to build your game from, it's going to lead to those issues. It's again why we talk about the importance of the core gameplay loop. That if you can't figure this out within, the first month of starting your game, then that means you're wasting time. And if you're wasting time, it means you're wasting money. And as we've said, like you can't get time back. You can't get plus. You can't hit a button and get added 3 more years of development to your game back.
Find it for me, Josh. Find it for me.
If I did that, I'd be rich. I could sell it to every developer right there. Just hit the button, you get 3 years back.
3 years of dev back.
Mm-hmm. And it's tough because we've seen games that could have been a success if they gotten done sooner. That
Sooner.
again,
Mhm.
the more money you put in, the harder it is to get that back. And if
Right.
you're trying to build a stable business off of that, you're not going to succeed. Again, I defer to like people like Jake Burgett who gave that GC talk we mentioned
Man,
last
yeah.
year or last
My
week about it.
favorite. Yeah, that's like one of my favorite ones. I go back to that one like once a month just to hear it. It's if you're a game developer, I highly recommend that one. Continue.
Hmm. Yep. But yeah. There you go. Just put more QTEs in the games, and that'll be
I haven't seen
perfect.
any. I haven't seen any in a while. It's been a little bit. Have you
Hmm.
seen any?
No, not
It's
lately.
been a bit. I was actually thinking about those the other day.
Hmm. And that could be another topic about elements that are just not really popular or fallen, or
Right. What's
trends.
fallen out? What things have fallen out that were just there every day, like Brown and
Mhm.
QTEs.
There you go. But I think with that, I think that's a good point to wrap things up for this weekend. As always, if you have suggestions for topics for us to talk about for
Please,
future shows,
please.
comments and all that, if you want check out our Discord or check out the Game Wisdom Discord. It is available. There's links to it down below. Do all that liking and subscribing people tell you about. And we'll be back, I would say, next Saturday. We'll shoot for I would say like 4:35 p.m. starting time. We'll see how things go. Let us know what you think in terms of the format and the template and all that. And if people want to follow you, Josh, what are the best ways?
The best way is just my Twitter, so you can find me at casual_scrub, and that's the best place to find me.
And there will
The
be a
links will be
link.
down below, of course.
Yep.
And please, if you have any like comments, or let's start a dialogue about this. What do you want in a game? I'm interested as a dev. I'd like to hear what you have to say, and definitely help us give us some more stuff that we can keep talking about. I
Hmm.
had a blast, Josh. Um, yes.
Yep, it was great hanging out with you for Saturday, and hopefully I'll be able to figure out these stream issues at some point, or at least for the record version, they're probably wondering like what people are talking about. It's all silky smooth.
I know, right?
And hello, emitters. I'm
Hey,
afraid you
cheers,
are
welcome.
just as we're wrapping up
As we're
there.
wrapping up, thank you for stopping by, my friend.
Yeah, but we'll be back next Saturday, and I'll be back later tonight for my regular game streams. So for everyone watching, come back for it. Daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where some of the art and science of games. And until next time, everybody, have a great rest of your weekend.